Thank you, everyone, for showing up for today's session, Reflective Practices for Coaches. We are very delighted to have Iain with us, who's going to be sharing not only today's session, but about a month later on 14th, he's going to be with us for another session. He's kindly agreed to do 2 sessions for us because I could not choose which topic was more interesting and I wanted both. The glutton me got us the 2 topics. What are we going to do today? Reflective practices for coaches. Reflective practice is a proven learning and development approach that involves consciously and deliberately thinking about experiences to develop insights and apply these in our coaching practice. So we are going to be learning how to engage with reflective practices. And before I hand it over to Iain, a little bit about Iain, we've sent you his detailed profile, but Iain is the founder of the Executive Coaching Center in Auckland, New Zealand. He is trained in clinical psychology, subsequently completing a PhD in work stress. Iain has been coaching and consulting for over 30 years, working in Canada, Hong Kong, and New Zealand. We are super delighted to have you here, Iain, today. The session is all yours.
Thank you very much. And I'm absolutely delighted to be here, very excited to be able to present this material to you. And what I'd like to do is to really just start by sharing my screen and we can begin. So you should be able to see that now. And we're going to, I'm very interested to run sessions that are as interactive as possible. So I always like to have some kind of interactive item. And we're going to start a poll, which Shanti will put up for you. There's no need to do it immediately, but if you can do it by the end of the session, that would be really great. And I'm very interested just to have your views on 3 things. So one, I'm interested, how many books on coaching have you read in the last 12 months? So again, I don't need the exact number, but just approximately, so you can fill that out. How many hours have you spent in deliberate conscious reflection on these books? So maybe you've taken notes, maybe you've talked them over with your supervisor or a friend or whatever. How many hours have you done that? And then what percentage of the material that you've read have you successfully implemented? And we'll come back towards the end and just have a bit of a discussion around this. But I'm very interested in just learning a little bit more about how much reflection people do and how that leads to implementation. So while you think about that, we will proceed. So this material is from my book, Reflective Practice for Coaches, which came out last year. So it's available from Routledge if you would like a copy. And it's got lots of practical exercises and lots of suggestions on how you can improve your reflective practice. Tonight, we're going to be looking at the ICF competency embodies a coaching mindset, and particularly we're going to be looking at part 3, that effective coaches develop an ongoing reflective practice to ensure one's success. So as Shanti has said, reflective practice is a relatively straightforward idea. So it really involves conscious and deliberately thinking about experiences. So that means it's not just ordinary thinking, it's not just pondering upon. This is a conscious and deliberate, very often a structured process to help you develop insights and to apply those to your coaching practice. So there are lots of models. I'm sure many of you will have seen the Gibbs model for reflective practice. So it's structured and it's clear and it's really very effective and consists of these 5 steps. So as a coach, what you might do is reflect on what happened in the last session. How do I feel and think? What's good and bad? How can I make sense of this? What can I learn? And what's the action plan? So you can see this process is quite different from just thinking about something. This is structured and clear and leads to both insights and to action plans. There's not a lot of research on reflection, but there is some very interesting research. Some of it about people in call centers, which suggests that for those people who reflect for just 15 minutes a day, those people achieve 23% higher productivity. And for UK commuters who spend time in their travels, going to and from work, thinking about and planning their day, they're more productive, happier, and not as burnt out as those people who don't. So it seems like reflective practice is not only useful for being able to improve our knowledge, but it also can improve lots of other things. So the question is, how do we go about reflective practice? So we'll start with individual coaches, and then we will look at some other ideas that relate to how you can use reflective practice in pairs, and then later on in groups. So here are some very simple ideas that individual coaches can use. So the simplest is that you have a reflective journal. So you simply, after every session or every second session, or maybe at the end of every week or every month, whatever you decide is appropriate, you simply write free writing for maybe 10, 15 minutes. You can use a structured process like the Gibbs cycle. If you're using free writing, it can be very helpful to go over it at the end and simply circle some of the key reflections that you have. Other forms of reflection are writing a story about what happened. So writing a story is particularly useful if something goes wrong. So you might write a story as is, that is, I was dealing with this I was dealing with this client, and the coaching session didn't go well, and I felt like I'd really missed the point, And then you might try rewriting your story in a positive light. So I did my best in the session. I really tried as much as I can, and so on. Reflective practice can also involve dialogues. So a dialogue between your inner critic and your inner coach. You can write about your sessions in an objective way as an independent. You can do reflective practice during your meditation, writing poetry, drawing, and so on. So there are lots and lots and lots of different ways of doing reflective practice, and no clear research to suggest which is better. So what I'd like to do is just to talk to you about a case study. So a very interesting man that I worked with, he was an accountant in a large manufacturing firm, very bright, very able, but very anxious. He was very interesting. He'd read a book, which many of you might have read, called The Happiness Trap by Russ Harris. And he'd learnt a lot about what Harris writes in that book, which is about acceptance and commitment therapy. And he'd learned a particular technique called diffusion. So diffusion is really a mindfulness-based technique in which, when you have a disturbing thought, you don't try to fight it or push it out of your mind. You observe it, watch the intensity of the thought rise and peak and then fade away. That's the technique. And he'd learnt that, but what he told me is it didn't work for him. And so I suggested that he simply keep a reflective journal. He didn't want to keep a journal. He was an accountant. He loved his spreadsheets. So he wanted to keep a spreadsheet. So we designed a spreadsheet that had the date. It had the situation that in which the disturbing, anxious thoughts arose. It had what he did in terms of diffusion. It had the results. And he simply kept that spreadsheet for 2 weeks between sessions. and came back saying, well, this is the first time he'd really been able to apply it. And when we talked it through, the reflective spreadsheet was very effective because it really forced him to apply this systematically. And he came to the conclusion that actually the way he was implementing his ideas was actually rather casual. So reflective practice is very powerful in that regard, extremely helpful to for us coaches when we're wanting our clients to implement some things. He went on to do quite a bit of work out of the book, The Happiness Trap, and in the end left his job because he felt there was a clash of values between his current job, and he got a job that suited him much better in a waste minimization company. So a very interesting case where I never taught him anything apart from reflective practice. I did very little. He did the work himself because he was able to think about and apply this technique in a systematic way. So there are a range of options, as I said before, for how we can use it. We can use reflective practice at an individual level, reviewing sessions, for example. We can use it by applying it to a workbook, and I'll talk a bit about that. We can use it in supervision, and we can use group-based reflection. So what I'd like to talk about is another case, and another very interesting and rather more complicated case of a very successful coach who I worked with who came to me for professional development. He was, as I say, very successful in many ways, had a good caseload, but he felt like he wasn't consistently making progress. And he lost 2 clients in 1 week, both of whom had gone to another coach. And when we looked at how he went about selling his coaching sessions, he did so in groups of 10. And now I'm not sure what happens in India, but this idea of selling coaching sessions in groups is not uncommon in many countries. And I wasn't really sure exactly where to start with him, but I suggested that he keep himself a reflective practice of what happened in a number of his sessions and ask the clients to do the same. And when he came back to see me a month later, we looked at some of these reflective journals and we found a very interesting thing. And that was that essentially, while he was very empathetic and very good in many ways as a coach, it was quite clear from what his clients felt and what he felt that he didn't place a lot of emphasis on finding solutions. He was really empathetically focused, and he didn't place a lot of emphasis on action planning in his coaching. So we came to the conclusion that whilst he was selling in groups of 10, there was a kind of an economic and almost unconscious bias for him to keep clients coming back because they'd already paid for the 10 sessions. And that resulted in a kind of a dependency by clients, which he didn't really want. We went on to do some work together on solution-focused coaching, and he ended up selling in much shorter blocks, and it proved to be very satisfactory. So again, a really interesting case of a situation where reflective practice was very effective. You can also use reflective practice around a workbook. So this is really the idea that rather than reading a book, enjoying it, particularly a coaching book, reading it, enjoying it, well-written, interesting material, and putting it down and moving on to the next book, that you spend some time, you pick a topic, you find a book or a video, a training course, but you actively, while you're reading it, go through a relevant reflection. So is this, what's being said in this chapter? How do I feel about it? What can I learn from it? What can I apply? So undertaking making your reading in a much more structured kind of way can often lead to much, much more effective results. Reflective practice can also be used in pairs. And so this is a pair of coaches that came to me wanting to implement a therapeutic approach called motivational interviewing. Now, I'm not sure whether you know this. It's a really interesting area developed by an American called William R. Miller, who developed this approach when working with people with alcohol and drug problems. And essentially, it's an 8-step process where the therapist tries very hard to get into the client's head and understand their motivation, and in that way helps them to build their motivation and change. So what happened with these two coaches was that they started to read the work of Miller, and they met on a regular basis and they discussed their reflective practice notes. They applied it to their clients. They reflected on how the application went. They shared their experience. So instead of just going on a course, they worked together to help each other to systematically learn in a much more careful way and to apply in a much more effective way. You can also run group reflective practices. So I've been doing this for some time, and the idea here is that you can get a group of coaches who want to improve their skills and work with them together. So in the day, we start off by talking about psychological safety, making sure everybody feels comfortable. And then people identify issues they want to be coached on. And then I coach each individual in front of the other people. So it's quite unlike group supervision where we're talking about, well, I've got this client and this is what I did and this is what the client did. This is actually watching a series of live coaching sessions during the day and then having the opportunity to have the person who's being coached reflect on, what is it like now to be in the client's shoes in front of my peers? They can get reflection from me. They can get reflections from the other participants. And so what I found in that kind of group is that this sort of experiential learning and the powerful multi-level reflective feedback that people get can be extremely useful. So a little case study about that. I was working with a group of coaches who wanted to deal and learn some skills around dealing with workaholic clients. So instead of giving them a lecture or having a PowerPoint presentation, I simply asked them two questions. Do you ever work more hours than you planned? And do you plan to reduce your workload, your work hours, without success? Now, all of the people in the group could identify times when those things were relevant for them. And so I worked through the group, coaching each of them in turn. And because they were now not learning knowledge, they were experiencing the process of being coached in terms of their own occasional workaholic tendencies. This experiential learning was very powerful, very effective in terms of assisting them. So it's another form of reflective practice. And in fact, a colleague and I, Stuart Forsyth, wrote this article, which, so this is in the International Journal of Evidence-Based Coaching and Mentoring. It's an open source journal, so anybody can read it. So we published this year, and I'd just like to briefly walk you through what we did. So it's a study of the effectiveness of the sort of group-based reflective practice that that we talked about. And please go and find it and read it if it's of interest. So one of the things that we were interested in evaluating was how effective is the coaching relationship. Now, as I'm sure you all know, a lot of the power of coaching is actually in the relationship. Much of the variance in terms of whether people succeed or not relates to how well the coach and the client get on. So the session rating scale is a very well used measure, and it measures 5 different things when it's adapted for these kind of circumstances. So the questionnaire asks, how was the quality of the relationship? Was it satisfactory? Did we cover the topics that you wanted? Did the approach of the coach suit you? Did you learn something about coaching in the sessions? And overall, was the coaching effective? And as you can see, there was a very strong response from people and very good engagement in terms of the power of the coaching relationship. What we did was we had what's called a within subject design. So what this meant was that when people came to the session, they identified 4 different topics that they could be coached on. But during the day, we only ever worked on 2 of the 4 topics. So at the end, we asked people to rate how bothered they were by these topics they wanted to work on. And we were then able to analyze how effective was the coaching when people actually went through it. In other words, with the coached items, and did the non-coached items change in terms of people's perception of how much it bothered them? And as you can see from this graph, the coached items changed a lot, and people felt much less bothered by the items that they were coached compared to the items they didn't. So a very interesting little study, and something that you might like to go away and read. For those of you who want to explore reflective practice a bit more, I do run training courses. I typically run quite short courses, so they are generally 1 hour a month for 3 months. So typical topics might be setting up a regular reflective practice or reflective practice and solution-based coaching, all sorts of topics that are covered in the book we can use in that regard. So one final question for you to think about, because this is a reflective practice session, is to reflect on what I've talked about and to have develop an idea in terms of one action that you're going to take on the basis of your reflection for today. So that really is my presentation. I look forward to seeing you on LinkedIn if you're a LinkedIn member, and please, if you've got questions or issues or interested in exploring this a bit more, that's my email address. So for those of you who want to delve into the topic, these are the references, and Shanti will send you out a copy of the presentation, so you'll be able to have these. And I welcome your questions and comments. As I say, I really like an open dialogue, so I'm looking forward to having your views and discussing matters with you.
You can unmute and ask, or you can raise your hands and we can go in the order in which the hands have been raised. Yes, Dharmesh.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm on the road, so I won't be able to kind of come in on the video. But thank you, Iain, for the beautiful insights. What I understand is that this is more akin to self-supervision in some sense. And is that an accurate assessment, or is there something more to this?
No, I think I've never heard it described like that, so it's a very interesting way of describing it. But that is correct. Yes, it's really the idea that we have an awful lot of power ourselves to learn very effectively and to improve our practice if we're systematic in the way that we go about it. So
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'd really kind of love the group reflection, because there is a lot of learning that can happen through that.
Yes.
Now, I'm just wondering, I mean, as coaches, definitely we understand this reflection, but have you seen instances of this being extended beyond coaching? I know you said you worked with workaholic clients, so does this effectively work with the clients also?
Yes, absolutely. So yes, I think that very often, particularly for clients who are stuck, encouraging them to reflect on the session, to use reflective writing to give themselves the right kind of space to think and to consider issues helps an awful lot. And in relation to use of reflective practice outside of coaching, it's very widely used in education, in medical training, in social work, in counseling, in therapy. So there are many, many areas. But although it is in the competencies of the International Coaching Federation as well as EMCC, the European organization, it's not widely written about, and it's not something that there is a lot of research on.
Interesting. No, thank you so much, Ian.
Thank you very much for your questions.
Hi, Ian. This is Aparna.
Hello.
Hello. So you've really, got me thinking.
Good.
Am I doing justice to my growth and development?
Yes.
Because I've been doing a bit of reflection, but that's been quite erratic. It's not been regular.
Yes.
Just to sort of share that whenever I have done some kind of reflection for 2-3 months,
Yes.
found a sense of not only growth, but also a sense of satisfaction that, yes, I'm doing justice to the profession I'm in and, my own growth and development, so I really see the value of reflective practice.
Yes. Yes.
The practice I've used is I love Excel sheets. So I've been making an Excel sheet with maybe 4 or 5 questions
Yes.
after the session.
Yes.
To say which of my strengths as a coach did I leverage in the session.
Nice. Nice.
Which are the competencies where I know I need to work on.
Yes.
Were visibly present in the session. So
Yes.
that's the kind of reflection that I've been doing.
Wonderful. That sounds fantastic. And again, you can see just how if you have a spreadsheet, you've got a little bit more structure, you actually get much, much more out of it. And you get a sense of satisfaction of being able to write and to see it grow. And then I assume you have supervision or peer supervision, very often really useful to be able to take that reflective log back to your supervisor and just discuss, well, this is what I'm doing, etc., etc. And that helps as well. So well done. I think that's fantastic.
Thank you. But I'm making a commitment now to be more regular.
Oh, good. I'm delighted to hear that. You've made my day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, Ian. This is Rachel here.
Hello.
So there's quite a bit I see in, I see a lot of value in reflective practice, something that I've been doing for a while.
Nice.
And this, a while back, I mean, when I just started doing reflective practice, there was this concept that I had read about reflection on action and reflection
yes.
in action. Yeah.
Yes. That's Sheen's work. Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes.
I think I've done I've been able to be fairly regular with reflection on action, but
Yes.
in action is, I believe, a little bit more challenging. So
Yes,
I'd love
yes.
to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes, so let's together explore. So you give me your view of what you see the difference, and I'll give you my view of reflection in action and reflection after action, and then we can have a discussion. How do you see the difference?
Yeah, so for me, I think on action is like more like, post-mortem. So you thinking back on what your experience was, what you felt, what you could have done differently, what you learned.
Yes.
So
Yes.
and the way what works for me is I just have these, these few questions that I kind of go through, and I'm
Yes.
talking more specifically in the context of a coaching session.
Yes.
So that kind of tells me that, okay, what was there stuff that I missed? Was there somewhere I could have gone deeper? What was
Yes.
something that I could have used more? And what are things that I've learned sometimes about the client and, that may
Yes.
not have registered in the moment, maybe.
Yes.
So I think that's useful. I've also used reflection on action, I think, pre-session,
Right. Right.
which is like
Okay. Interesting. Yep.
setting intention and,
Yes.
checking my own
Yes.
state and my own
Yes.
energy, all of that. I think for me, on action feels challenging because, and again, talking in the context of a coaching session, when I'm
Yes.
in the session, sometimes I think I should not say sometimes. I think for me, being in the session is an experience of being in flow, and also
Yes.
it's also an experience of not really being too present to. So for me, a good coaching session is where I'm almost not there in the like
Yes.
there's no
Yes.
sense
I
of
totally
being.
understand. Yep. Totally in the flow.
Yeah, so I think I have not ever been able to really make meaning. And there are moments when I realize, oh, maybe I'm judging this, and and I kind of move away. But I just feel that it's harder for me to lean into the learnings of reflection in action
Yes.
versus
Yes. Yes.
on action. Yeah.
Yes. So I think that's a fascinating, and thank you very much for sharing that. I do think that the reflection in action is a really useful thing that people can develop over time. And it's really the idea that as a coach, we can be both subjective and objective, and we can switch between the two during a session. So we might spend a lot of time at the beginning of the session just really being with the person, listening and paraphrasing and really understanding them. But as the session goes by, it can be extremely helpful to try and take a more objective view of what's going on, not necessarily in the way of absolutely not switching off from them and having an internal dialogue, but just allowing what are the patterns that are emerging in the session, and how am I going to be able to use those? And I think that this movement between the subjective and objective is something that therapists, very good therapists, develop quite well. And I think we can as coaches as well. I think the art of it is really being quiet enough and listening carefully enough so that the patterns emerge in our mind without us disconnecting.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I'm suddenly seeing a very different view of reflection on action, because I'm realizing I do it.
Yes.
And it's okay not to be conscious of it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank
Because
you.
often, if people are telling us, particularly if they're telling us a series of different stories about what's happened between sessions, we'll often see a pattern in that. Maybe there's a series of conflicts, and just being able to say to them, look, I've just noticed that, in 3 of the stories you've told, there's this pattern of conflict erupting quite quickly. Is that how you see it? And those sort of things can be enormously powerful in moving people away from it's their fault because they are causing me to feel this way, to actually, if I want to do something about this, I need to look in the mirror.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you bring this up, because today I watched a coaching demo by Shrikant. He's there on the call.
Right.
This was the piece that really, moved in the call, where he suddenly said, there are two things I'm observing, and you're talking about two things, but I'm seeing the same thing. And
Yes,
then
yes,
it just
yes.
solved for the client. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect example. Yeah, you can see how that is a classic reflection in action, because it's during the session that these kind of observations happen, and that those are typically, as you saw, enormously powerful.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's, I think most people spend a number of years coaching and using their relationship building skills before they get to that stage.
I agree. Yeah. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I've enjoyed our discussion.
Me as well. Yeah.
Ian, I have a question.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of reflective thinking at many different levels.
Right.
I have a question for you. I read in a book that less than 4% of the people, they can really do reflective thinking. And the book was written by one of the MCC.
Right.
It may be 4%, it may be 6%. But I know in my practice, I see that a very small percentage of people can honestly reflect.
Yes. Yes.
So as someone who has been practicing this for more than 3 decades,
yes,
how can we make it easier? Because it is a very powerful way. And, whether it is the field of healthcare, where they do morbidity and mortality discussions, whether it
Yes.
is Army, where they do after action review, or
Yes.
good managers, they would review. How can we make this, or how can we contribute making this as mainstream? If you had a magic wand, what is that you would do to make it mainstream?
Look, I think the art of making it mainstream is giving people easy to use and highly effective tools. I think the difficulty, if you think about students at university, for example, when they're starting, often reflective practice is part of university education, but most students, when they start, hate the idea of having to write a reflective log. And I think there's a lot we can do in that space. So first of all, I think giving them the technique. So the technique might be, the 6-minute writing technique. So what I want you to do is to go away after the lecture today, write for 6 minutes. I don't care what you write. You can write, this is boring, this is boring, this is boring if you want. Just write anything for 6 minutes and see what happens. And then really encouraging people to build on that over time. So I think effective techniques and helping people then over time to see the value of it. So I think many people, once they start a reflective journal, find that they're able to effectively address many of their own issues, even though they felt stuck at the beginning of the writing. Often the process of writing will help them to digest and to gain insight and to think about how they want to behave differently. So I think it's providing people with that link between the idea and the practicality that is the art of spreading it. But I'm interested in your views.
So I have a follow-up question.
Right.
By the way, I don't have the answer. Generally, people ask a question when they already have the answer, but I don't have the answer. In addition to technique, is technique the secondary thing, and the primary thing is to have that mindset, to create that safe space for a mindset? Because all our life we have been consciously or unconsciously trained that if we admit to what happened or where we erred,
Yes.
it brings shame.
Yes.
So
Yes, look,
how do we take, because that I think is one, technique is number 2. This is my view.
Yes.
I want you to comment on it.
Yes. So I think there's several ways of looking at it. I think my view is that it's very hard to get people to change their mindset unless they have experienced something. So giving them the technique, enabling them to experience it, see the value, helps them to change the mindset. So I think that the mindset is absolutely critical, and I think you've identified something really important, and that's why we see it so clearly set out in the ICF coaching competencies, because it is definitely a mindset. It's not that we need to do this for 10 minutes a day and tick the box. It's about, exactly as you say, being receptive to looking at yourself, evaluating yourself, deciding, and, was this actually really any good? Did I really see the change that I wanted? And so on. That's really what makes the difference. So absolutely agree, mindset is very important.
So could there be one question? So one is the technique part of it, and then let them experiment and see the value. But from your experience, is there some questions that you could actually, because people, when they come, they have a lot of their own personal database.
Yes.
And once in a while, it has to have happened. Generally, it has happened more than once when people have benefited from reflection.
Yes.
Until unless you're speaking to a 2-year-old, it is rare that somebody has not benefited from reflection in their
Yes.
life. It may be 5 years ago, it may be 10 years ago, it may be yesterday.
Yes.
So is there a way that you have seen or you have used where you make people, and you use the word receptive, which I like very much, is that they become receptive, and then they do their own experiment, and then they develop a concrete mindset around it.
Yes. So I'm a great fan of solution-focused coaching. So in the solution-focused coaching, we're often asking people, in the past, what have you done that has helped? And that's a great question to get people moving away from this is my problem, this is what's occurred to me all my life, and into something that is, while backward looking, is much more positive and focused. And I think if we can ask those sorts of questions, that really helps people to see the patterns. And then I think once they can start to see that maybe they have had feedback from other people that's caused them to think, we can then ask them questions like, well, if it's a workplace setting, tell me about some of the bosses who've given you feedback. What were those bosses like? What was the effect on you? Why was the feedback so useful to you? And so focusing in on those exemplars of feedback and reflection can really reinforce to the person that they are making good progress, and that reflection is powerful and an important part of their development.
Thank you for the conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for your wonderful questions.
Iain, the poll results are ready if you would like to take a look at them while people are.
Yeah, thank you. So as you can probably see, what I was trying to do in this poll is to see how many books people were reading, whether they were reflecting on those or not, and whether they were effectively able to implement them. So my poll results just disappeared, Shanti. Can I?
Yeah, I'm going to show them, share results.
Right. Okay, thank you. Oh, there we are. So poll number 1, what we see is that people read on average 2 to 6 books a year, so in a 12 months so that's great. That's fantastic. But of course, reading books in themselves, it might be entertaining, but it doesn't necessarily lead to development. And so I'm really interested in the next question. Can we move to the question 2?
I am on question 2. I'm wondering why it is not enabling the share poll option. Ended. I'm going to. No idea. I'm going to share my screen so that you can all see my
Okay, yep, that would be
screen with the
great.
shared
Thank you.
results. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Pardon all the windows and
Got a
closing
lot
them.
of windows open.
Yeah. Wow, I didn't realize that. Is my window visible? Is the poll visible?
No, no.
I
Oh, yes,
shared
I
my
can see. I can see the poll. Let me just. But I've only got poll 1. It may be what you can do, Shanti. Just tell us in poll 2
yeah.
where the results, what the results are.
Yeah. So a equal number of people for 20 over 20 hours, over 10 hours, over 5 hours. Only 14% for over 50 hours.
Right. Okay. So our conclusion is people read a lot of books, 4 to 6, and they spend a kind of a moderate amount of time in coaching. And then, as I recall, the third poll, what it showed was that most people implement about half of the ideas they read. So I think this
25% was the highest.
25. Okay, well, that's even better. That suits my hypothesis even better. So what we're seeing from that is people read a lot, they reflect a reasonable amount, but actually they don't end up implementing a lot. And the challenge I think I would like to put to you today is actually, are you reading too much? If your reading was, if you reduced the amount of books you read, if you read books that were more focused in terms of the areas that you wanted to develop, and you spent some of that time reflecting, writing, what did I learn? What's relevant to me? How can I implement it? You might actually get better value. Now, I'm not saying you necessarily would, but I think it's a challenge that's worth thinking about, because a lot of the people that I work with, the coaches that I work with, are fantastic readers. They read lots and lots of things, but they finish one book and they put it down and they pick up the next. And so my point tonight is that that's a fantastic form of entertainment, but not necessarily a fantastic form of professional development. Are there any other questions that people have tonight or today? Tonight for me, it's 9:20 here, but I realize it's afternoon for you.
Just reflecting on what you just said, Ian, I attend so many sessions without that gap to sit and reflect.
Yes.
And then probably 6 months later, I've actually forgotten
Yes.
what I heard, what happened.
Yes. 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 Yes, exactly. And I think that if I guess it's your job, so you're in a rather different and unusual place. But I think that's the case for a lot of people. And I think there's a lot of good criticism you can level at professional development, where people's essentially measured on the amount of time they go to courses. Now, as you can see, the amount of time you go to courses doesn't necessarily correlate very well with how much you actually learn. And so in a sense, I think organizations are starting to look around for a more balanced way of thinking about professional development, and looking at well, actually, the purpose of professional development isn't just knowledge building. The purpose of professional development is being able to take these ideas, implement them. It's about skill and capability building, and how can we better think about that? And that might be a mixture of going to training, having reflective journals that you submit, and maybe having some kind of feedback from your supervisor in terms of the effectiveness of the training in enabling you to implement a new approach. Any other questions or reflections? Would anybody like to, so I issued another challenge towards the end. I said, what is the one thing that you've got out of this presentation tonight that you'd like to implement? Would anybody like to share, when we've obviously had a few very useful comments from people already in terms of wanting to have their reflective practice a little bit more systematic? Anybody else got another view on what an insight they gained tonight, or an action they're going to take on the basis of our session?
Hello, Tina here.
Hello.
I'm from Auckland. Thanks so much for the session. And I'd like to share, I think my action would be, I would do more reflective practice in reading those coaching books. I'm actually reading your book, Ian, The Reflective Practice, and also another one called Changing Your Questions, Change Your Life. So it's another coaching book. So what I'm challenging myself is going to reflect a lot and trying to implement what I'm reading to the daily basis and see how much I can do or increase my implementation in the practice.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Fantastic, Tina. Delighted to have you here, delighted to have your views, and I think that would be a fantastic step forward. Well done.
Thanks.
Hi, Ian.
Hello.
Hi. My name is Biswajit. I'm from Mumbai. This is so my mentor told me this is one of the best sessions that you should attend, and I thought, I'm a beginner as far as coaching is concerned. I'm not I have not done much of coaching, but I'm learning coaching with Abhidya.
Yes, fantastic.
Now, so thank you. So only thing is two things. One is reflective journal. Okay, that is my action point. I mean, I've been trying to do this for a long time, but I think it is enough is enough. This is the time to get to that.
Right.
It is not that I have not tried it. Okay,
right.
I have tried it, but whenever I sit on to write at the end of the day, like what are the things that has impacted me throughout the day and how did I do?
Yes.
It's like not all the experiences that you have throughout the day are good ones. Okay?
No,
and
exactly.
It tends to take me to a not so good one more often than the good ones.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And that, and then the learning is not too good or too, and that's why I was not very keen on continuing that.
Right.
Okay. But when I heard the entire discussion, I was thinking how good, what is the difference between this reflective practices and being mindful in your conversations?
Yes.
Whatever conversations you have.
Yes.
So, and then of course we talked about in action and on action, and that was really a good discussion.
Yes.
So, just a short story. I went to a mall with my wife on a weekend. We wanted to grab some food quickly before my movie starts.
Yes.
And my wife started walking from counter to counter without looking at me what I like.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
But we had just 5 minutes and we had to grab something because I was hungry.
Yes.
And she was also hungry. Because we spent a lot of time in shopping. So, so just when we stood in front of a stall, she kept looking at the menu of the other stall, other food stall. And I just grabbed her back and said, stand here.
Yes.
Okay. And suddenly, and in a fraction of a second, I thought it was not right.
Right. Right.
Okay. My action was not right because there are people looking at me and her, and people will make judgment.
Yes.
My wife never felt it. Okay. But it was onto me because I felt something has gone wrong. So I apologized and we went to see it. So when you say inaction, this is something that I could relate to. So whenever we are in a conversation, whether it is a coaching conversation or any other conversation, as we are presenting, we know something is not right, and so we take a pause and reflect, and but when we look back too much, okay, does it take us back? Like it is like looking at your rear view mirror while driving. You don't look at rear view mirror for too often, too much. You just do as much so that you don't hit someone in your back. So doing too much of reflection, is it good for coaching or good for any conversation? So those were the ideas that were in my mind. So I thought I'll probably talk to you. Maybe it's not in the proper flow of the conversation that we are having.
No, I think you've raised a number of very interesting points. What I would say in terms of continuing your reflective practice is what you do is to reflect on the best and worst things every day, so that what you end up with is not just focusing on the negative. That is important. There's obviously a lot you can learn, but you probably need to balance that with what you did well during the day. I think you will find a balance like that will be more motivating. And I think in terms of, I think your approach in terms of identifying the reflection in action, in other words, I've probably done something that isn't so good, and apologizing is a classic example of reflection in action, a very good example. And the question, can we do too much? Absolutely. But my experience is that most people don't do enough. So it's a little bit like a vitamin or something, a tiny amount won't do you much good. You have to have a certain amount of the vitamin to have a therapeutic dose. And after that, you'll get an overdose. So it is what's the therapeutic dose of reflective practice that's right for you and your practice. That's really the important thing.
Thanks, Ian. That's very, very helpful. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you. Great questions.
Ian, this is Sundar from Chennai, India. Thank you so much for the learning opportunities. So I have a lot of takeaways, actually. One of the beautiful things was reading less and reflecting more. That is going to stay with me forever now.
I'm delighted. Thank you. Very kind.
Because I have been feeling guilty many a times that I am not reading many books. So this is giving me a tip saying that maybe I'm right. Maybe if you take a book, there is too many things to reflect on. There are lots of learnings and too many things to reflect on. That itself will take quite some time, other than our regular coaching session. So that is one takeaway for me. Second thing is, while reflecting, I have understood I'm practicing putting pen to paper while reflecting. That's a journaling portion. Whereas in your example, you have said a couple of times that people use Excel sheets. So which one is actually preferable? Because I felt that putting pen to paper and writing it down on a book or a diary, it helps us to register deeper. Or using either Microsoft Word or Android Keep or Excel sheet, is that preferable? What's your take on that, Iain?
So I think that, well, first of all, there's no research on any of this that I've ever seen. So we don't really know from an objective point of view. I'm happy to share my prejudice. My view is essentially that you need to find something that works for you. So you can see in that example with the man who was the accountant, he used spreadsheets all day, every day. That was the carpet that he walked on. He felt very comfortable. And so that made immediate, that was an immediately accessible and helpful approach. I've got another client who's actually a copy editor. And so the idea of a spreadsheet for her would be a complete horror. So she wants to write stories, and a narrative approach is really much better for her. So I think that in terms of working with clients who want to do more reflection, I think the art of coaching is very often not saying, I think this would be best for you, but rather saying, here are some ideas. Which of these ideas appeals to you? I think that's the way to build and to identify the right kind of reflective practice technique for people.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, that's what I do. I leave it to my clients to choose whatever they feel comfortable with. But I do the reflection by writing it down, pen and paper. So that's why I just wanted to find out your ideas. Thank you so much for sharing, Iain.
And interestingly, that's what I find most useful as well. I find that if I write it down, then I essentially can think while I'm writing, and that helps me to really gain the insight and decide what I'm going to do. So absolutely agree with you from a personal point of view.
Thank you, Iain. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And one more point is reflecting on what we read and what we learn, and then what are the takeaways and how we can apply it in practice. That is one. Second thing is, after each coaching session, reflecting on the coaching session, whether we did well or whether we didn't do well, what is that we could have done differently, and then improving upon it. Third thing is reflecting at the end of the day or reflecting at the end of the week, depending on our convenience. I use 3 questions, which actually Dr. Marshall Goldsmith had suggested. The first question is, what went well for me in the day? What challenges I faced during the day? And what I could have done differently during the day? These are the 3 things I generally use to reflect on the day or the week, depending on whichever is convenient.
Yes. It's fantastic. I think if you're able to do a little of those, you've probably got the right therapeutic dose of reflective practice. Well done.
Thank you, Iain. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
So, Iain, this is Dave, and I'm in Bangalore. It was truly delightful to experience this session, and especially the case studies were very, very helpful. Thank you very much for the session. As I would like to share an observation with you and the rest of the people who are present here. See, as one gets into a reflective practice, there has to be something that could be a takeaway from this reflective practice, which one can easily recall. In actual situations or in the session, as we call it. So is it worthwhile looking at labeling some of the takeaways so that there is an anchor that's available for us? So different situations, both in coaching, in work practices, in our personal lives, different reflections could also, run across various labels. If we start, in terms of behavioral learnings that we have that we take away from the sessions, so from the
Yes.
reflections. So if we can start labeling, or at least, capturing those in our minds.
Yes.
Is it more helpful in recalling them on situations that demand them? So instead of letting it just remain as a journal or as a spreadsheet, as you say,
Yes. Yes.
maybe 2 or 3 labels that are core to the learning that we have from that reflection.
Yes, totally agree with you. I think that what we know about habit formation and actually changing behavior is that the anchors are extremely important, and therefore having some of those. So some of my clients put little post-it notes on their computer, or they write little notes to themselves at the top of the page when they're taking their notes during the coaching session, or lots of little techniques like that are extremely useful. And, for some people, just having a little note of be quiet and listen can be very powerful in terms of getting them to reminding them that they might have a good idea, but actually there's no point in saying anything as a coach until the client's ready to listen. So actually listening and reflecting and building the relationship is the important thing. And you're totally right. You need an anchor to help you to remember that in the session. So absolutely agree.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad it resonates with you as well.
Totally. Yeah, I don't know whether you've read the book Atomic Habits.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so again, it's a kind of a key point in many of those books on habits. Totally agree.
Any further questions and comments for Ian? Yeah, if not, we can wrap up. People, I've put up the links to the upcoming sessions in the text chat. Please do register. And we look forward to seeing you all again later this month, and to meet Ian again in October. 14th October is next Ian session. So I look forward to meeting all of you yet again. Have a great day.
And thank you very much
Thank you
indeed,
so much,
Shanti, and for this wonderful opportunity. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ian.
Yeah,
Thank you
wonderful
very
session.
much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.